Y'all, filming tutorial videos are difficult. There's a lot of angles that you don't think about, and yeah, I've been practicing doing a few tutorial videos for you guys. So bear with me. I'll get better as I go. But I tell you, it is a little bit of work to film a tutorial video. Show you guys how to make a fall swag. Yes, you heard me right. You can do it. It's not hard. We're going to do this as a more intermediate, advanced swag, but I definitely believe that a beginner can do this because you can stop at the point that you're comfortable. And if you're more experienced, you're more advanced at floral design or decorating in general, then you can keep going with it. But the technique we're going to use today is my zip tie method. This method really does help you put everything together without the need for a glue gun in the beginning, and it's very secure. If you live in the South, you may have issues with hot gluing things in because the heat and the humidity can cause your florals to fall out. Even in the South, we don't really get a cold fall until really late October. So if you have warm digits, especially now, if you have warm digits, then you're going to, if you're a Southerner, this may affect you. If you're on the East or West Coast, the Midwest, it's not too bad. All right, so let's get going. For this tutorial, the zip tie method, you are going to need zip ties or cable ties. If you like this method, I suggest just buying a bulk amount. I use black zip ties because they're kind of disappear when you're working with florals, so these are great. Make sure you have a good heavy-duty pair of wire cutters, or dikes is what they're called. These are not the same kind as the little wire cutters. Your floral supply places will have these, or Lowe's or Home Depot. I think they have them as well, or Garden Center might. You want to look for the one that has a spring load in it, but that doesn't matter if it doesn't have it. Mine always eventually come off. Pair of scissors, a hot glue gun and glue sticks, and then you're going to need some silk florals. You can use whatever you have laying around, but if you want to do two matching ones, I suggest going and purchasing the florals from either a Hobby Lobby, Michael's, or some kind of a craft store, or a good source sometimes for silks can be Goodwill, Salvation Army. Those places tend to have a lot of silks that people get tired of and they discard. And most of the times they're still pretty good as long as they weren't used outside. I've cut apart and taken apart silk florals from thrifting a million times. So, all right, so I'm gonna show you some silks that I picked up, and these silks we're going to buy two matching sets to do two swags. So pick out the elements for the first swag and then just duplicate it. And I'm gonna show you what I chose. I suppose it would be helpful if I showed you guys what we're making. So this is the first of the two swags that we're going to be doing. Isn't that pretty? All right, so whenever you're creating floral design for wreaths or swags or arrangements, there's three elements to take into consideration. You'll need a line flower, a focal flower, and a secondary flower. Now you certainly can do an arrangement of all line, all secondary, all focal, but if you want a kind of mixed garden look, it usually has these three elements. So for this swag combination that we're doing, I have these really interesting, it looks like a cross between a fern and a pine. This one is definitely a pine, and I like that it's kind of got that aged sort of browning on the edges. And then I have an autumn uke, a baby uke. And make sure before you start that you go around and take all your tags off. And if you're a floral designer and you're learning how to do silks for a customer, make sure when you take your tags off, you put them in a little jar so that you can keep up with the price of everything. Okay, so those are my primary line flowers. And then I found something interesting. It's kind of like a secondary flower, but it's little miniature pumpkins. And I thought these are really cute. This is going to be the base. So you need two of those. And then your focals are going to be these hydrangeas. And the hydrangeas are a terrific focal flower. So a focal flower is anything that has a face. So a hydrangea, a lily, a rose, those are all focal flowers. And then my other secondary flower element are going to be these cosmos. Aren't they pretty? These are kind of a pretty taupey color. And then normally I don't use onesies of flowers, but because I have a specific budget to stay with on these and my client doesn't want an overall heavy floral look anyway, I just picked up one ranunculus for each of these swags in a cream color. So whenever you have a color, you want to replicate it through the design. You don't want to just have one cream colored flower. If you have something cream, then you want another smaller flower in cream. If you have something orange, then another accent in orange. And then I did pick up a fall leaf that we're going to add as an accent. I don't want it to be screaming in your face fall leaves, but the leaves will be there as an accent. And then I had another fall piece that I will add in. It's just a leaf piece that I have that's going to go inside on the base. And then for texture, I have these, which are nice. They're dry. They're actually drieds that are on a silk stem. This one little piece goes a long way. You can cut it apart into several sections. That's what I'm always looking for in my florals. I want something that I can cut apart, take apart, and use in many different ways. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 12 elements here. Now, a lot of people think that purchasing silks from a craft store will save you money. Where it will save you money is the prices per stem might be slightly lower than like a high-end home decor store that sells silks. Not much, really not much, unless you get them on sale. So a lot of the craft stores will have these items on sale a lot of times for 40–50% off when the season's starting to close. That's where you can save some money. It's the labor. The labor, it's really worth it sometimes just to pay someone to make it for you, especially if you don't know what you're doing. But if you're crafty and you think you can pull it off and you would like to try, or you're a budding floral designer and you'd really like to try, then this video is for you. All right, so I'm gonna film this on the table so you can see me doing this piece. We're gonna lay it flat to work on it initially, and then I'm gonna hang it on an easel stand that I have. Now at home, you probably won't have an easel stand, but you can hang it from a nail on the wall, or a wreath hanger will work as well. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we're gonna do is organize all of our silk stems. I'm going to remove all of the price tags. I collect these in a jar, especially if I'm doing these for a client so I can keep up with the stems. This is just a nice hack so that you don't forget or lose the tags, and then you have to go back and try to figure out what stem costs what. As you can see, I'm shaping out the stems and sort of organizing them. What we're going to do here, I've already made one swag. So on 2 of the pumpkin stems, so I had 4 pumpkin stems, I made a hook on one of the stems by simply just bending over the stem and zip tying it. And I do this on 2 of the stems at the same length so that they match when I go to hang these swags up. This is an effective and easy way to make a hook for your swags. Sometimes we make swags and then we have to figure out like where to make a hook and make a wire hook, and this is just kind of a built-in hook. So here I'm sandwiching these 2 stems together, and they're going to go back to back. So what we're going to do is create a skeleton. Now I am shaping out the stems, and what I will do here is remove some of the little tiny pumpkins because they're going to get buried when I start adding more silks to this piece. So I want to be able to see them, so we want to utilize them because these will be inside the swag and you won't see them. This is also a great way to stretch out your silks if you want to make other pieces. These pieces are not going to be seen, they're just going to get lost. So this is a good way to get a little stretch for those extra floral stems. So as you can see, I'm measuring this and kind of placing where I think that it will look the nicest. And I want them to kind of meet in the middle. I'm also going to take it over to my other swag and make sure that they are both at the same length. If you're making 2 pieces, they don't have to be completely identical, but you don't want one that's much shorter or much longer than the other one unless you're doing a kind of dramatic asymmetrical look. So what I'm going to do here is cut the extra stem. You also want to remove any extra stem length because it will just stick out the bottom. And that also makes your swag a little bit lighter and less cumbersome. Now make sure you have a good pair of wire cutters like the ones I showed you earlier. It really does help a lot. There are professional bigger wire cutters. They're kind of like, I'm not even sure what they're called, but when you have a difficult stem, as I will have one here that I just could not cut. And usually I'm really good at cutting these stems. You can usually just score them and wiggle them apart, but sometimes they don't want to give. So here I am zip tying this securely in a couple of different areas so that I've got a firm, tight fit here in the middle. And this is going to be the backbone of the swag, or our skeleton. And where the hook is, that's where this is going to hang. So make sure that the length is where you want it. Here I'm adding another zip tie. I just really want to make sure my middle piece, that's the foundation of my structure, is secure. And just trim away any excess zip ties that are sticking out. Do that as you put them in. It's a lot easier than trying to, find one later, or it's sticking out in kind of a wonky, hard to get to area. Section, the skeleton or the backbone of the swag. I went and measured it against the first swag I made, and it's the right length. Now we're going to add this kind of pine fern hybrid looking greenery. This is the one I was having a lot of trouble cutting, the longer part of the stem. So what I did here is I cut off the parts that I could cut, and then I just simply folded over the longer stem. I really had trouble with this on the first one. Knowing that, I just went ahead and did that on this one. It also can be used as a secondary hook, or just adds a little bit more stability as well. You do not have to do this. If you can cut it, that's better. But if you can't cut it and you don't have the wrist strength to cut it, you can just simply loop it. You don't want the bare ends sticking out because it's not going to look very pretty. So here I'm just adding a zip tie in the middle, and then I'm going to secure that piece in, and then we'll start adding in these foliages. So I put that one that I folded over as a long piece. That's going to be the tail or the bottom of the swag. And then I took the two shorter pieces and I'm attaching them at the top of the swag, sort of in the swag where it sort of blends into that top little pumpkin spray. You always want to shape your leaves and stems as you go, and that gives you the flair and the shape that you want, and gives your swag some dimension so they don't look flat. You can shape everything out later as well, but this way you have plenty of space between the elements. So now we've added two elements. We have the pumpkin and the foliage, and I'm just securing that. And here we go. So you already have this part done now. So now we're going to go through and add our third element. We're going to add the autumn colored eucalyptus. This is in fresh terms called baby euc, or some of you might know it as spiral euc. It was very popular in the 70s. You could find it dried. This is a nice artificial euc, and it adds some fall color without being fall leaves. I like to do things that have a soft fall look and not so in your face Thanksgiving-y looking. So I think that these autumn leaves of the autumn euc is very pretty. So we're going to place these in the triangular shape at the top, and then reverse it and put it at the bottom. And the nice thing about doing a swag like this, you can also make this a table swag or table centerpiece. You'll see as we go along here that if you do this sort of end-to-end technique, you could make this as a base. You could stop right here, and then you could add some fresh pumpkins or artificial pumpkins, and you could build around it. You could do this as a centerpiece and add candles and votives, and it really does work well for either. So I'm securing this now into the lower part or the tail of the swag, and everything right now I'm binding in the middle. This is called a binding point. That is the part of the swag that has the waist, if you will. Now that I have the top and the bottom with the eucalyptus, I'm going to go in with another zip tie and secure all around the binding point. And like I said, this kind of gives you a cinched middle to your swag. So next we're going to add the aged pine, and we're basically just repeating the same steps. So as you're designing your swag, you just sort of start looking for, where is there a hole? Where do I need to put a piece of foliage? Look at the top and the bottom. You want the top of your swag to be slightly narrower or smaller, and the width more at the bottom. So when I'm cutting apart my pieces, a lot of times I think about like, well, do I want heaviness, more heaviness at the top or heaviness at the bottom? Sometimes when I cut my pieces apart, I will put the smaller pieces at the top and the longer, heavier pieces at the bottom. Really, there's a million different ways to do it. This is just the technique that I do. But as you can see, this is coming together super quickly. Again, you could just do this right now and have an instant centerpiece for your Thanksgiving table or for a fall party. And again, just add some pumpkins right in the middle. Continuing to add the aged pine. And if you need to at this point, you can stop. If you have a wreath hanger or a nail on the wall that you want to hang it up and take a look at it, go ahead and do that. You want to be shaping this out as well, so you don't want this to be a flat piece. You want to move your stems to the left, to the right, up and down. The back of this swag right now will be fairly flat because it's going to be hanging on the front of, this is a double swag, so double doors. You don't want the swag to be kind of curvy and bumpy in the back because it will swing on the door. It will not lay well. However, you don't want it to be flat. So there's different ways to create a more multi-dimensional look after we get past this point. I've got some dried winged elm that I'm going to use to add some texture and some whimsy and some depth to this. You can add this on the back side, so I can put it either on the front or on the back. If you put it on the back, you need to make sure that it's fairly flat when you do this. Otherwise, like I said, you don't want your swags to wobble. So when I'm putting this on the back, I'm going to make sure that the pieces are going to lay flat so that I don't have this sort of wobble in the back. So I've secured the branches to the back, and that's adding a lot of texture and a little more movement to this piece, and also a natural element. I really like mixing drieds with my silks so that it has some movement and looks a little more natural. All 100% silks tend to just look a little flat, but if you mix in some drieds, it does add a nice textural element. I'm checking the back of this, and I'm adding a few more pieces to the back, and I'm making sure that it does lay flat along that binding point. Once I have that secure, I just check it again. I make sure that my hook is not getting buried and that I could find it, and that it's roughly the same length from the binding point to the top of the hook on the second swag that I made. So I'm always measuring that to make sure. And when you're planning on making a hook, think about what it's going to be hanging on. If it's on a nail, a narrow hook like the width of this one is fine. If you're going to use it on a wreath hanger, you're going to want to make your hook wider, because wreath hangers have a more wider base on them. And this is looking good. I've got it secure. I'm starting to shape it a little bit and make sure that it looks nice. All right, so now we're going to add these very pretty kind of taupe colored cosmos. And you want to cut the stems on these. We're not going to need the stems that long. And we're going to add a section at the top and a section at the bottom. So basically we're just mirroring. Whatever we have at the top, we're adding to the bottom. This will give you a nice consistent look from the top of the swag to the bottom of the swag. And these are very nice. They're very soft and pretty. I can shape them really easily. And I just kind of play with them a little, arrange them, and then you guessed it, zip tie it straight in the middle. Once that's secure, we're going to go in and add in our second stem of cosmos. And I really like these because they have a little bit of a lacy foliage and they give this more of a whimsical, delicate look. And how I'm doing this is I'm adding it to the bottom. I'm mirroring how it looks at the top and the bottom. You kind of want the top of the swag slightly shorter and the bottom of the swag slightly longer. So I would say like 1/4 to 3/4, if that makes sense. Half, not quite where it's cut in half, like everything is equal at the top and the bottom. You want the top to be a little bit shorter in appearance and the bottom a little bit longer. I'm also doing a crisscross motion here because we want to kind of have this sort of X shape as well. Here I'm going through and just checking to make sure that everything is secure. I want to make sure all of my elements are attached well. I'm clipping out any of the extra long stem. And as you can see, it already has a very pretty design. The back of it is got the little bit of winged elm, and I'm going to make sure that that's secure, so we're going to zip tie that together a little bit better because we don't want it to be wobbly. The colors of this are very lovely, a little bit kind of like Over the Garden Wall in feel. I'm going to add one cream colored ranunculus. I normally don't just do one stem, but this does have a lateral on it because I'm just trying to keep this sort of light and airy. We don't want it to look overly floral. I like this overall color palette. It's got this sort of 70s whimsical autumn harvest kind of color palette, but it's very soft and has a whimsy to it that I'm trying to keep. So I don't want to do anything that's too big or too heavy or bulky. I do have some hydrangeas that are going to go in the middle of this. So those are going to be quite full already. So we're just trying just to add a little pop of cream since I have the cream colored hydrangeas. So we replicate that cream color again. So overall, it's looking very pretty. Now is where we will take our two hydrangeas and put them in the middle of the binding point. This is where we're going to start filling that area in. This is a great way to cover this section so that it doesn't look bulky. You could also do a ribbon here if you don't want to do any more floral, but my customer likes hydrangeas, so we're going to add those. A technique for cutting these thicker stems is just to kind of score around the rubber or plastic. And then once you kind of cut through that, you can get to the actual wire inside, and then you can just kind of bend it and break it in half. I'm going to remove some of the leaves from the hydrangea. We're going to use those later. I'm going to show you how, but I don't want the bulkiness of the leaves right there in the middle, and they're usually not placed exactly where you want them anyway. So we're going to place these two hydrangea in the middle, and we're going to stair step them. So one will be slightly higher than the other, and I'm going to make them opposite of the other swag where if I put one up higher on the left, I will put then one up higher on the right. And that way they kind of mirror each other without being identical. And then I'll proceed to zip tie each one of them in individually, and I will make sure I don't do it too tight so that they're hard to adjust or maneuver later. I want to go a little bit lower on the stem because I may want to bend that hydrangea stem forward. So don't go too high up on the neck, otherwise you'll kind of constrict your hydrangeas. And here's where you'll add, when you're adding this in, you're going to kind of feed your stems down inside the lower foliage. You don't want it all on top of that foliage. You want to make sure that you don't have stems sticking out everywhere over your designed pieces already. Now you have just a little bit of a small area to conceal, and we're going to work on that next. Lost my scarf. All right, y'all. Back to the tutorial. So as you can see, everything was basically mimicked on each side and bound together right in the center. So what you have after you get done magically is a complete swag. Now it's not totally complete yet, but it looks like you spent a lot of time designing this piece, doesn't it? So right now you can see there's a bit of a hole here. Now, if you're crafty with bows, you can make a big bow here, or you can put another hydrangea, but what we're gonna do is add some pine cones and some pumpkins. Now you could stop here, just put a bow, or put more foliage or flowers here. You could take some of your fall leaves, which I'm going to add in just a minute, and just cut some pieces and conceal that little space, and then you'd be done. If you want to take it to the next level to make it look a little more interesting, then we're going to add some other elements. Now, one of the things that I added during the tutorial that I didn't mention in the beginning of the video is this winged elm branch. I had added those on the first swag that I made when I completed it. It was kind of an afterthought because I needed something that was more natural and woodsy looking. And so this time on this particular swag, I went ahead and added it in. You can wait and do it after you're kind of finished because the branch, anything you do that's dried is brittle and it can break as you're working with it. So it's up to you. One of the things you want to pay attention to also is making sure that we don't want this to be flat looking, and once we start working on this a little bit more, we can shape it a little bit. but you don't want this back part to be too bulky where it's sticking out, because it will not lay properly on the door. And I'm going to show you how we're going to finish off the back as well. So I'm going to use a nut, because I'm seeing now you can see there's a little space there. I'm going to zip tie the back of this real quick so that that's tight and it doesn't move, and that there's not a space, because I want this to lay flat. And the beauty of the zip tie, as opposed to hot gluing everything, is you can just cut the zip tie and remove something really easily. With hot glue, everything gets stuck together, especially since most of the faux florals, I would say all of them, unless they're a wire and tape wrap floral, are made out of plastic. And once hot glue and plastic meet, they're bonded for life. It's super hard to get them apart, and it's really messy if you can't get it apart. All right, and then you want to make sure that the hook that we made originally is still in the middle. I know I have a second hook here, but that was because of that one silk. Of all these silks, I could not get it cut. And I mean, I'm usually pretty good, but I think it's the fact that I have a little carpal tunnel now and I don't want to strain myself. There is a silk stem cutter. It's a machine, it's a manual machine that's heavy duty that you can purchase if you're really getting into doing silks, or you're a silk floral designer. I'll tell you right now, it's worth the money, because if you get carpal tunnel, that sucker really helps cut those heavier gauge stems. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to hang this on a standing easel. A standing easel is what the funeral industry uses, or we in the floral industry use for funerals, where you hang a swag or a funeral tribute spray on. So let me grab that. I don't know if they have these at the hobby stores. You can check and see. I've never looked for one because I always buy them from my floral supplier. But if you can get your hands on two of these are 60-inch high. These are excellent, especially if you make wreaths or you make swags. It's nice to have two that are standing side by side. There's not always a free wall space to hang things on, especially like my shop. I think I'd have to go somewhere in the back in the hallway to actually find a free wall. All right, so you're gonna unfold the easel. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then we're gonna hang our swag on our already done hook here. And you can also make another wire hook. I'll show you how to do that too, because it depends on what kind of hanger you're gonna be hanging it on, if this will work or not. Because metal wreath hangers tend to be quite wide, and you can make your curve in this dependent on whatever you're hanging it on. So if you're just hanging it on a nail, you just need a small curve. If you're using a wide wreath, then a wreath hanger, you'll need to make that a little bit wider. Okay. So now I'm gonna hang that here, and let me go back up a little bit so you guys can see better. So this is the completed wreath and the completed swag. I'm putting in the background, so we have our reference. So now, as you can see, I have a little bit of a gap here, and so we're going to cover this up. There's, like I said, a few ways to do it. You can make a big bow and stick it there. You could put some moss, some more greenery. This is where your hot glue gun can come in, is how they're going to look when they're hanging. So for example, two identical wreaths are kind of boring, where they're very static and they have all the elements going in the same direction. If you're making swags and wreaths, you can have them in a semicircle crescent that are facing each other, or when you design the wreaths, they can go off to the left and off to the right, or off to the, whichever direction you're looking at. You can curve them. There's so many variations. I tend to like to make them look symmetrical, but the elements will go off in different directions so they don't look like two little cookie cutter swags or wreath. That's how I do them. You could obviously do them any way you want. All right, so let me grab the other elements that we're going to add to this wreath. Again, you can stop right there. It looks very complicated and like you were designed whiz, but basically it's just a bunch of focal, line, and secondary flowers, okay? All right, here's where we're gonna add a little icing on the cake. This is a fall swaggy piece that I already had, and because I'm a silk designer, I tend to have a lot of extra pieces laying around, and I want this to look more custom, and I don't want to use all of my elements from one store or location. I like to kind of mix it up. So I mix a high-low kind of thing. I mix more expensive silks with less expensive silks, and I also incorporate dried elements to my designs because that gives them some interest and texture as well. And so this is just a piece I have left over from another project. I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and we're going to add that in to the middle. This is why I just never throw anything out. I use everything, especially silks. Even silk leaves, all those silk hydrangea leaves that we cut off earlier, these, we're going to use those to cover up the back of our swag when we're done. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm going to take these two pieces that I have, and you can literally do this whole thing laying on a table, but now that the piece is up, I really want to see how it's looking, and see how I'm adding that there to give you guys, pardon my messy background there. I'm kind of covering up that space, or maybe I want to use this piece because ultimately it's just kind of covering up the space, and I'm not really going to see that one as much. I'm a little parched, y'all, a little parched. I'm really ready for cold, spooky weather. In the South, we always lament that it's not really, it's autumn, and we try to pretend like it's autumn, but it's still feels like summer, Indian summer, for sure. Loosely attach that here, and got it where I want it, and then I'll go in and secure it. Technique is a super great way to have your wreath look custom or your swag look custom. A lot of the pre-made swags that are sold are so bulky and fat in the middle, and I just don't like the way they look. But they're kind of mass produced, so what do you expect? Okay, and then this other little extra tidbit I had, I'm gonna put it in the opposite direction over here. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and zip tie that together because it had come apart. Now you can use wire and tape for all this as well. You can actually wire this whole thing together. I just find that the zip ties are way faster and way easier to use. Just any stem. And what you want to try to avoid doing is having it too bulky in the middle, so you want to spread out as you're attaching. That makes sense. So if this is your binding point, you don't want a big old thick binding point. You want to kind of spread out. So as you're zip tying, things kind of go on the lateral of the things you just zip tied to, if that makes sense. All right, so you can see I instantly covered up just with those two little pieces. Our little pumpkin vine is caught. It's trying to grow, I think, on the easel. So that is done. Like, you could hang that, call it a day. You'd be fine. Okay, but we're gonna nuance this a little bit more, make it look more custom, make it look more interesting. And this a little bit more elaborate. My customer wants something that looks very whimsical, and it's giving Over the Garden Wall vibes. It's the colors. Have you guys seen Over the Garden Wall? If you haven't, treat yourself. It is the best animation. It just makes you feel like you walked into central casting, where they have decorated the entire movie set with fall gloriousness, and it's an animation. The music is great. It's got an old-timey feel. I love it so much. We watch it every holiday season, every spooky season. It's one of my faves. Over the Garden Wall. Anyway, the color palette of this is definitely giving Over the Garden Wall. So you might be surprised to see that I didn't actually go with a whole fall leaf thing in the beginning. I don't want this to look like you know, a Thanksgiving display threw up on it. I want it to be subtle. Fall tones, fall colors, but subtle. I am going to add these leaves. And these are, I didn't add these in the beginning because when I first made this, I wasn't going to use them at all. And then afterwards, I made it. And after I made it, I said, you know, just a touch of this little bit more vibrant orange. And so since I put this at the bottom on this side, on the other piece, I'm going to reverse it and do it on this side of this piece. I'm going to find a little hole here that's needing something. And listen, the things you've zip tied on previously, you definitely can use those zip tie sections. That's a little hack. If you get good at this, don't tighten your zip ties completely too tight. And if your zip ties are starting to loosen, you didn't do it right. You make sure you catch the zip tie, and I swear I've done this so many times and I still never get it right. Make sure you're catching the zip tie correctly. You'll know what I mean. The little teeth won't catch. So that spot right there, where I put the hydrangea on, did not. And if you're not sure if you got it right, try to go back up the zip tie, and if it won't give, then you know you did it right. So I just added in that little fall color. I always make sure all of my silk leaves are facing the right direction. I don't want to see the back side of the silk stem. And I weave it kind of through whatever I'm working on, okay? All right. And then I have a piece of winged elm that's kind of sticking out in an awkward angle. So I'm gonna cut that off. I can always go back in and glue it into a more pleasing space or shape. At this point, you wanna look at everything. Make sure all your flowers are facing forward and nothing is hiding beneath something else. And this is why I went through and cut out a few silks as I was making this, because I knew they'd get buried in here. Okay. So now I've got that extra piece of fall foliage. I'm going to put that over here. And at this point, this is where if you want to hot glue, you can, because the bulk of this piece is very firmly secured. So here and there, hot gluing something lightweight, especially like I said, when you're gluing plastic to plastic, it pretty much secures itself. I love how this has just this one little white colored leaf on it, so pretty. And always heat your glue gun up when you first start on projects so it's ready to go when you are. Nothing worse than waiting on your hot glue gun to warm up. All right, so I'm gonna attach that one there. So I have color over here and color over here, a little from the other. And then I had picked up these, I needed some little small pumpkins. And so I found this pumpkin, looks like a pre-made arrangement. You know, you can just stick it anywhere. So what we're gonna do is take the pine cones off of it, and believe it or not, these are faux pine cones. And when I saw these, I used them last year in arrangements. And when I saw them, I could not believe that they were fake pine cones. I mean, here's the fake one, here's the real one. The only difference really is the color, and the real one's kind of beat up. Now I prefer real pine cones, but we are going to use these artificial because I bought this for the pumpkins and I really didn't even pay attention to the pine cones on it. And then I thought, those are perfect. These 3 pine cones on the other one. And then I used 1 bigger and 1 smaller, I believe. So sometimes you may not find the exact silks you're looking for when you're out and about shopping, but you can always take apart silks too if it has the elements you need, and then you can use this for something else, which is what I will do. And I have to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and the craft stores have just gotten better and better with their silks, and the quality is just as good as it's made from some of the same companies, so don't feel bad buying from the craft stores. All right, so I have a pumpkin, And what we're going to do with that pumpkin, here is where we're going to get a little bit more advanced. This is when if you really want to trick it out and make it look nicer. I'm going to add some dried broom corn to this and some dried wheat and the pumpkins and the pine cones, and then I'll see if I need anything else. Before I add the pine cones, I'm going to add the dried broom. This is broom corn, and this is actually what they make brooms out of. You just strip all the seeds off of it and you can make your own broom. And I had actually dried these last year to do that very thing. But then of course I did not, as and who's surprised? I have so many projects going all the time. But if you ever get these fresh, you can dry your own and make your own. As a matter of fact, if anyone follows Grant McConnell, she has a tutorial on how to do this. She actually dried her own. So what I just did right now is I took the leaf off of that. I want to use the leaf, but I didn't like the position that it was in, so I'm going to retape it up to where, this is just florist stretchy tape. This is the kind of tape we use for corsage work and stuff. And you need to stretch it and pull it to activate it. So if you've ever bought some at a craft store and you didn't feel like it worked very well, it's probably because you didn't pull it. It sticks on its own self, but you kind of have to activate it. It also makes it thinner, so your corsage work is a little more lightweight. Okay, so since I put that on the left side on that wreath, I'm going to put it on the right side so that it's different and not matching exactly. Piece is a little too stiff. I want a little curvature, so I'm going to switch, find another piece. I like it when it kind of curves a little, so let me go find another couple pieces. Last one I'm talking about right there. I like it when it looks like this. So we're going to clip that. And I'm not loving that foliage stem, so I'm going to put that on this side right here. Yeah, that fills up that side nicely. And I'm going to zip tie it again. My hydrangea stem is kind of sticking out back there. I need to secure it down here. Okay. I always use my wire cutters to cut the zip ties, so I save my clippers and scissors. So what were we doing? We're going to add the broom corn on this side, right there. All right, and now that's right in a lovely spot here, so it's got a nice flow to it, okay? All right, and now check if you've got a lot of pieces sticking out and about. So you don't want that on those zip ties. You want to cut those off. And here it's starting, it has a nice kind of wider base. It's not like a skinny, because this will give you some more stability when it's hanging on the door or wherever it's going to be. All right, so I have that piece there. Now before I add another, I really need to go in and start shaping the flowers and making sure everybody looks nice and that I can see everybody. Flowers are expensive, and so you don't want things that are buried in the design. Okay, so now I'm adding one more. I might go ahead and use that one because this is a pretty piece. It's just a little more straight. And so we're gonna put that right there. I don't want this to look messy, so I might do something different with this piece. Maybe put it up here instead. Yeah, I like that better. And then what I'm gonna do on this piece is I'm gonna hot glue it in because it's going to go more into the middle section of where I'm putting it. What I want to do is if I have any pumpkins that are hiding, like this one back here, I'm going to take them off so I can start moving things around into the middle. And we'll do that last as a last accent. Sorry, I feel like something flew in my ear. Let me get a sip. I've had my door open at the shop, and yesterday I just had a little miniature swarm of bees come in because I have flowers and I have honey scented, but they're actually beeswax candles, so I think they were drawn to them. And I get so sad when they come in here because I'm afraid they're not gonna be able to come out. So I'm never afraid of actually getting stung because I don't bother them, but I feel bad that they're stuck in here. But they're kind of buzzing around. Okay, so now we're gonna add a pumpkin. So on that wreath in the back, I added the pumpkin on the right side. So on this wreath, we're gonna add it to the left side. Oh, look at that. I didn't even securely get that on something. That's okay, we'll fix that. So that means we want this to be up a little bit higher than that one. Don't know how I did that. Not to worry. Zip tie it right back. And you'll be zip tying away. Take a shot every time I say zip tie. No, don't. Zip tie. And you won't even be attaching it to the actual form. So what music are you guys listening to for spooky season? I have a favorite radio station. It's called deadair.co, and they play amazing music from all the different decades and genres and spooky television shows and commercials, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so pumpkin was on the right on that one, and so we're going to do it the opposite. So the pumpkin, we are going to hot glue in, and I'm going to put it so that it secures itself into the center of the wreath. So pretty generously hot glue. This is the other thing. Generously hot glue. Swirl any of the little strings off right away. And whoop, try not to get glue on everything. You don't want to glue onto your leaves and stuff. And so we're gonna do that one, that side. Okay. And then I have a baby pumpkin. I'm gonna do that right underneath, and we're gonna glue that in as well. Now, if you prefer to zip tie that in, you're just going to need to create a longer stem for this, and then you can zip tie it down a little deeper in. Sorry, I meant to go a little bit lower there, so it's kind of underneath itself. You also, when you're doing this, you don't want to bury the hydrangeas, so be careful. You want the hydrangeas still to be showing, so pull those out so that you can see them. Okay, so we have our pumpkins added. Now we're going to do our pine cones. And I'm gonna, since I can access the bottom here a little bit better, we'll secure with the zip ties. Except that for me, the stems are a little bit short, so we're going to create a new stem with them. And that's why I will always save like my cut off pieces. I use a thinner piece. We're going to tape it. And the taping doesn't have to be pretty because you won't see it, but just securely tape it. And then you create yourself a longer stem, like so. And now I will use that stem and zip tie it. And you can really do either. You can glue it in or zip tie it in, it doesn't really matter. It might come up. Because as this gets fuller, it gets a little harder to zip tie stuff. But not impossible, not too difficult, just gotta finagle a little bit more. I am a hot glue queen, so I love hot gluing everything. It's so easy and fast, but sometimes taking just a little more time to secure things properly, especially when they're not there for your client and not for you. All right. So I'm realizing this part of this tutorial might be a little more difficult for you guys to see. So I'm going to put this back on the table here and glue these in. I'll show you what it looks like here in just a sec. Okay, so here I have all of the pine cones added, the 3 in the bottom. So I did a cluster of 3 pine cones and 2 of the pumpkins. And that gives me this sort of odd number, even though I've only have 2 of these and 3 of these. That gives me an odd number instead of 2 and 2 or 1 and 2 or whatever. I like this combination. And that's filling in that section. So the other element that we're going to add that I showed you guys earlier is this guy. And this is my last sort of textural element. So what I'm going to do is clip it apart into sections so I can utilize it in more than one area. And doing this with your silks helps you get a little more use out of them. And whenever you get a silk stem, it's yours to play with. You don't have to use it just as it is. As a matter of fact, hardly any of the silk stems that I use just as they are. I usually clip off pieces. I save pieces. I used some of my clippings to decorate a little pumpkin, a little artificial pumpkin. I'll show you all that in a minute too. So that thinned out that piece quite a bit and made it a little bit smaller now. And I had hoped that the wire in this would be a little more bendy, but it's not. So it's sort of a good idea to separate it anyway so I can get a little bit more use out of the clusters. So on the other swag, I put that on the left side, and on this swag, I think I'll put it over on the right side, although this part right here is giving me a good swoop. So I don't want to cross the line of that swoop. So what I think I'll do instead is, because that one has got a prominent spray on that side, I think I'll just add it down at the bottom on this side. And that kind of mimics and marries the pieces together. So we're gonna just, once again, I'm gonna lay it down here now so I can find a good spot to zip tie. I'm gonna zip tie it onto this side now. Years past, whenever I made swags, I would use a piece of styrofoam, and I still do that technique as well. And you kind of pick everything into the styrofoam. But this technique really is a quick and easy way to put together a swag, and you get a lot more control as far as it's more secure. Now, when you're picking into styrofoam, you can pretty much put the silk stems anywhere you want, but this is a much more effective for outdoor swags that you need to have a little bit more stability. Okay, so I just put that texture over here on this side, and I'll just take a few of these pieces that I cut. There's so many on this little bush that you get a lot of usage from it. I'm going to remove the lower ends. Just going to tape them together. Now, floral tape, it works well if you do it properly. If you're going to use this outside, you might, when you do the floral tape, then you might want to glue this piece in. because it'll help kind of keep that floral tape from unraveling over time. But this wreath is not going to stay on your door all year long. This is a seasonal wreath, so you'll probably put it out the 1st of September and take it down at Thanksgiving. So you should be able to get 2 or 3 months out of it. After the season, just dust it, clean it, and store it properly. And then next year when you pull it out, if there's anything that's loose or you need to replace, you can do that then. If you're an organized person, you can do it before you pack it. All right, so I'm just gonna add a little touch of this dried. You know, I don't like this berry that's sticking out here. I'm gonna cut that out. I don't really have that berry. Anyway, it was part of that little piece I added, my little scrap piece that I had. So I think I'll put this now. It's a little bit softer, not so bulky on this side, right about there. So I want my pieces to, what is the term? Cousins, not twins. Is that it? I want them to be cousins, not twins. I want them to look alike, but have some subtle differences. So they look a little more custom and not cookie cutter, machine made, or, you know, just kind of boring. Ow. Ooh. Hot glue. Ugh. Just dropped a blop on my. So if you ever drop hot glue, quickly rub your hands together to spread it out so you don't burn in one spot too long. I know that sounds counterintuitive because it's hot and you don't want to rub it, but if not, if you leave a glop of glue, it'll blister and burn on your skin. Yeah, hot glue is not fun if you. That's why I kind of like doing this method with the cable ties, because you don't have to hot glue so much. Let's try that again. Pay a little more attention where I'm going this time. Okay. Like I said, filming a tutorial, talking and designing at the same time, it's a little hard. So I will get better. Now, that's looking really good. I like the shape of it. It feels pretty, it feels nice. And now what we're gonna do is add in all those little teeny baby pumpkins I cut off and a little foliage here and there to kind of soften and give dimension. So what I'll do is I'll clip off greenery and pieces that I know are not going to be seen anyway, and they kind of get buried. We take some of those pieces to create a little nuance and a little bit more realistic. So I'll take a little piece of greenery and glue it in. Like for example, right there, just a little touch of greenery just to kind of bring some dimension. And those hydrangea leaves that I cut off earlier that were going to get smushed in there anyway, I cut them off and I'm going to glue them in into a few little areas just to kind of give some more dimension. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to bury my hydrangea with a bunch of greenery. You want to still see the orb face of the hydrangea. But this is just a way to control the foliage a little bit more and get a better overall feel. And we're pretty much done with this. I'm going to go through and tweak it and shape it, and then we're going to add those little pumpkins now. So the pumpkins would have just gotten buried inside this. So I took off a few, and then I'm going to use, you can use picks if you want, wood picks, or you can use the ends of other stems. Let me see if I have. Be right back. On thinner stems, it doesn't need to be long because we're going to glue these in. But I take the end of the stem, I push it in the styrofoam of the pumpkin. I put a dab of glue just so it stays on the pumpkin. Let me grab another glue stick. I think I just them down. I need to get some more glue sticks. And then I have now a stemmed pumpkin, and I'm going to put a touch of glue on that. Well, a generous amount of glue, not a touch, because we want it to hold on. And then I'm going to just pop in some of these pumpkins so that we create some dimension. So it's outside of it, not buried behind it. Sir, it's a public street, I realize, but take your conversation elsewhere. I just don't understand people sometimes. Okay. Let's not get distracted by our gentleman and his problems. So another little guava glue, so that stays on there. And you don't have to go crazy. I'm not trying to polka dot it with these pumpkins, but we want to just create a little dimension. I'll tuck one back a little bit. So do you see how that's giving, it's bringing the pumpkins, which are kind of in the back, up into the front of this piece. And so it ties the piece together a little more nicely. The smell of hot glue. I've been designing since I was 19 years old, so 38 years. And the smell of hot glue is just one of those smells that always reminds me of when I was a young florist, floral designer. Okay, I think one more. Maybe I'll bring that. To clean up, if you have a hot glue string mess on your piece, just take a blow dryer on a hot setting and just go over, and it'll make those little hot glue pieces dissipate. Kind of melts them. And that's it, guys. We're done with this piece. Like I said, I'm going to tweak it a bit. This is for a client, and make sure that these two match and are about the same height. But let's take a look and see how well we did. The nice thing about using these kinds of stands is that you can pretty much keep kind of a measurement. I'm going to move those over. I'll take those over onto a white wall so we can see them better, but they match pretty well. I think this one's slightly taller than this one, and that's okay. As long as where their hanging point matches, then we're in good shape. Let's take a little bit closer look at them. So this was the first one I made just to give you guys a good visual and a more truer representation of how the colors look. This is over by the front door. And they look a little more golden back here. The light in the back of my shop's a little warmer back here, but this way you can see how both of the pieces look. The last thing we're going to do is finish off the back of these wreaths so that when they hang on my client's door, they look professional and clean. She does have glass doors, so we don't want to have these the back side of this wreath showing through with all the zip ties. So what we're going to do is take some of the fall foliage that we clipped and saved and some faux artificial moss and just glue it all over the back of it. And you're going to want to make sure that you use a generous amount of glue here so that it sticks properly. The moss kind of acts like a giant felt pad. You could also use actual giant felt pads, or a piece of felt will work if you don't find artificial moss. Just anything to kind of cover up the mechanics. So I'm going to continue to finish the back side of this, and I'll show you how it looks when we're done. All right, we're all done. You can see that everything's covered nicely. You can't see the zip ties. Make sure that you don't cover up your hook because you're going to need that hook, obviously. And then just if you have anything that's showing the wrong side of the leaf, just glue that up or out of the way. This just makes sure that every which way that you're looking at this, all of the mechanics look nice. And on here I'm just finishing up by wrapping a few of the leaves around this. And that gives it a little tailored look, and it's just a nice touch, especially if you're a professional. You want to make sure your mechanics are always covered up, and it does make a difference on the quality of your looks. Well, what'd you think? I think they turned out great. I think my customer will be very pleased. They're very pretty. They fit all of the boxes. She wanted them to be a little woodland, a little wild, a little whimsical, not too heavy floral, not all fall foliage. So I think we did pretty good. I sent her pictures of that one yesterday and she really liked it. So I think she'll be pleased that she has 2 nice wreaths to put on her door for this weekend. Let me know what you guys think. If you like this type of video, if you like the tutorials, how am I doing on them? Leave me some little leaf emojis so I know you made it to the end. And let me know if you're gonna try this. Like I said, you can go from beginner to very advanced with this with the same technique. It's all about the technique and the mechanics. Once you master that, you can create as an elaborate of a piece as you want. The trick is to get used to using your hands, the strength in your hands, and using the zip ties properly. They're a little frustrating when you put them in the wrong way and you got to flip them around and all that jazz. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions and you'd like to see more of these tutorials, let me know. And happy fall, y'all. Enjoy. So as you can see, it's all complete and the hook is visible. Make sure you don't glue over your hook or you won't be able to find it later. And I've taken those leaves and I make sure that I have, if they're going to be seen from the front, I have them right side. If they're going to be seen from the back, I have them on the back side so that you are seeing the right side of the leaf. Does that make sense? So if this was going against a wooden door, it wouldn't really matter. But since it's going against a glass door, I don't want my client to see the back side of the leaf. It's just however it's going to look from the front, but this gives you a very professional and finished look to the back of your wreath.